Hello, and welcome to FIN340 Real Estate. This is a syllabus overview for the class. I am Dr. Fluharty Jaidi, and I will be instructor for this class. Today we'll be going over basics of the syllabus, what we should expect for the course description, class structure, and grading policy. So this class is basically an introduction to investment in real estate and how we can make investments in that real estate as it's being the largest investment asset in the United States. Approximately $3 trillion of assets sit alone in real estate held by the federal government, which is only 30% of the total real estate held within the United States alone. It can be owned directly through your own personal ownership or through corporations, or we can use rental properties. And the whole idea here is how do we obtain cash flows out of this real estate for the purpose of investment. But you can also purchase real estate for the purpose of simply living in it. We can also invest in real estate through other means such as ETFs or REITs, real estate investment trusts, which allow us to buy portions of the rights to cash flows for real estate investments through commercial property, which we wouldn't otherwise be able to invest in because we are simply too small. So we can access these larger, almost bank-like investments of real estate properties such as malls and obtain the cash flow from parts of that by investing in REITs. We'll discuss that later in the class. So the study of investment in real estate can be broken down into two major areas, and the first part of the class is going to be dealing with largely learning the law and the words that apply to that law, since they're pretty special to real estate as an asset class. They're very specific, and they may be very new to you in some of the laws, since they're from Old English Common Law, where we use the Unified Commercial Code here in America, but real estate has retained Old English Common Law. So the description of these financial instruments is also very important because we have to understand the cash flows. Now, the cash flows are pretty easy when it comes to real estate. So those of you who have had me for BCore 340, we've done a little bit more than what we would do in this class for cash flows, because what you're looking at there is the corporate side and cash flows with respect to shares of ownership. Here on the purchase of real estate, these are the cash flows produced by the property. So if you're going to rent the house, it's the rental income minus the maintenance expenses and property taxes, and that's about it. So it's pretty easy to figure out the cash flows there. And then valuing the property is simply as we have done before, or those of you who didn't have me for BCore 340, what you should have done is the present value of those future cash flows. So it's pretty easy to work on there with the valuation part of the class. Students will need to purchase a textbook here, The Real Estate: An Introduction to the Profession by Charles J. Jacobus. It's a very famous text. It's in the 11th edition now, which is what we'll be using for this class. It's pretty well used in the real estate profession. It's written by Jacobus as a professor himself, so he's really into teaching. So it's really designed for that. And the beginning of the class, as we said before, will be law, and then moving on to the details of brokerage and valuation thereafter. So here's the ISBN for Jacobus's book 10 and 13. You will also need a prerequisite of this class, a minimum score of a B- in BCore 340, which is all the requirements to enter into finance as a major. And this is a FIN class, so you should be registered as a finance major to take it, although some of you are not, and that is also okay. If you do not have a minimum score of a B- in BCore 340, you need to send me a message at jonathan.fluharty@mail.wvu.edu. We can work with you there and figure out what we need to do to get you either correctly allocated to the class or moved on to a different class, perhaps BCore 340, to get you right in line. All right. Successful students in this class should be able to identify and explain the various legal terms that are specific to real estate, and that's, again, the biggest part of the beginning of the class. Then you need to understand the risk and expected returns of the various investments that we will make in real estate, the relationship between these returns on real estate and other types of investments. I'll give you a hint, they usually work in opposite. So that can be pretty useful for those of you who remember from portfolio theory how one asset goes down, we want the other one to go up. So real estate can really hedge us in many cases. We need to understand capitalization rates and basic valuation of rental properties. So versus other types of assets where we're looking at the price and that is discounted at the rate of return, it is pretty common in real estate to instead use capitalization rates to determine the profitability of the asset in a quick discussion. So I happen to be friends with a pretty wealthy real estate owner throughout the United States. He owns several malls in the Pittsburgh area, and he was kind enough to describe to me capitalization rates, and when they go into discussions for negotiations, They don't discuss property value. They don't just, this is 13 million, this is 14 million. That's not a topic for discussion. What they talk about are the capitalization rates. So this property has a cap rate of 10%. And that basically means net of all of the expenses, this property is throwing off 10% on its original investment amount, or the consistent investment amount, plus the repairs. So that's what's key there, is you've got to include the repair costs or any renovation costs that are incurred upon the property. So that's what capitalization rate basically refers to, and instead of valuation for prices like we would do with a normal corporation or something like that. And then the last part I've added to the class that wasn't in the previous construction is that we need to understand the core tenets of what occurred in the 2007 housing market crisis, because they're pretty specific to real estate. There are two other items there with respect to oil hedge funds and just the collapse of the markets and banking sector. But in this class, we want to really talk about what occurred in the real estate markets with respect to prime lending and buying houses which are simply too large for the average American. They don't need them. And brokerages is having incentives which were probably not appropriate at the time in order to bubble the market. And that's what basically occurred, which also has the banking side to it. But we're going to focus on the real estate. So the structure of the class here, there are 6 discussions, one each week of the class. The next one is coming up on Sunday, so we'll get you that out here as soon as possible so you can begin on that. Otherwise stated, there are 2 per module. There are 3 modules per class, for the class, so there are 2 weeks per each module. So the discussion questions are graded out of 10. The content is primarily based on the scoring. We are not going to be grading you on grammar here. 7 points are allocated to your initial response to the prompt itself, and then an additional 3 points will be given for how you respond to somebody else's prompt answer, more or less. Again, I won't be giving you grades on the grammar, but we need to understand what you are trying to say. If we cannot figure out what you are trying to say, then you need to work on that. I will deduct points if I cannot understand you. There are 3 exams, including your final here. The exams are not cumulative, so they are going to be fairly easy from my point of view. They are online, and because they are online, and I'm not going to use a lockdown browser because that tends to be a little bit more difficult and unnecessary for all those parties involved. We will therefore have open note and open book exams. Again, they should be pretty easy. That being said, the online testing environment is a little bit fickle. If you do not use a stable connection, then you may be kicked out of the exam during the exam. Now, I've got it set up so that you can re-enter the exam by re-clicking on the entry button, and it will take you back to where you left off, but the timer will continue working. And there's nothing I can do to stop the timer from stopping. There's no option for that. It will just continue working. So you need to make sure that you are using a very stable connection when you are connecting to the class for the exam. And I suggest you use an Ethernet cord because that will make sure that your connection is very stable. Wi-Fi may also be used, but the connection may be dropped and you may have to re-enter the exam. So again, be careful with that. I can't restart exams or clear attempts if you simply got disconnected. That's not going to happen. So please make sure you use a stable connection. The first person who sends me an email that says, I lost connection, can you clear my exam? I'm going to say, no, it's in the syllabus. Okay, so make sure that you're using a very stable connection here. Last item is the Excel work-through assignments involved in an evaluation attempt for condominiums. It's a pretty easy work-through assignment, and you'll just have places to put in your answers and the solutions there, and I will grade them myself. This work-through constitutes 20% of your grade, and I will provide a detailed sheet for you there. The condominium is just to get you to understand valuation for multiple streams of cash flows coming from one asset. So it's not that difficult. It's pretty easy to do. But we have to learn to collate streams of revenue, and in times where there are different cost centers, we have to be able to work with that as well in the valuation of the property. Grading for the class, the grading scale that will be used is the typical West Virginia University grading scale, A through F, except for if you decide to drop the class in the first week or just stop attending and submitting assignments, then I give you an unforgivable F, which will cause your financial aid to be clawed back. So make sure that you are not just leaving the class. If you want to drop the class, then you need to formally drop the class. 6% of your grade will be determined by, 60% rather, determined by 3 online exams, 20% by the 6 discussions, and 20% from the Excel work-throughs. So it's really 20, 20, 20, 20, 20 through all of the assignments here, including the 3 exams, but taken together, that's 60%. Totaling 100 there, no curve immediately for this class, but I will respect the right to curve at the end if I feel it is necessary. All right, guys, so that's the end for the first little video here. I will be posting the next video here shortly as well, in which you will receive chapters 1 and 2. The first module goes through 8 different chapters. The first 2 chapters here are really just how do we figure out where the real estate is and what's the law behind real estate, the legalese behind that, so we understand what constitutes a plot or a plat and where that is and how to read deeds. It's interesting in some ways, but it can be boring in others. So we will have a bit of a whiteboard work through on some material there, and notes as well along with slides. And eventually you will also see my face. I've just moved into a new place, speaking of real estate, and my office is not completely set up yet, so it's a little bit underwhelming. And once I get that set up, we will be face-to-face to an extent. So look forward to talking with you guys. Bye.